It's so nice to be back to be able to give you another book review. I've read several books since the last time that I made a video, and so many of them were amazing and they were beautiful, and some of them were really sad. Most of these are pretty cozy and they're a little bit adventurous, and there's some cottagecore in here, but then there's some history as well. And then there's just some fun educational stuff. So I want to start with talking about cozy. This book, Cabin. When I heard that this book was coming out, I was so excited about it that I tried to hold it from my library, and it just was taking forever to show up. It just didn't show up at all. And after a couple months, I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go buy it. So I bought this. I am going to donate it. This is an actual story about a man who lives in the Pacific Northwest. And he decided one day, I guess out of inspiration, kind of like with Henry David Thoreau from his book Walden, which I love, he wanted to buy a cabin in the woods. And it was really small, a very small shack. And he wanted to kind of fix it up and learn how to do that and just experience life in the woods. He had one of those office jobs and he was just ready for a change. And this experience changed his life and even his career. It was nice to read about someone doing this today. My only issue is that he goes into detail about all the things he did to fix up his cabin, and I wanted more of his personal experiences and thoughts. And while we did get some of those, we didn't get enough of those. We heard about some of his interactions with the locals, some of the times where he would fix up the cabin with his friends, but I didn't really feel much of who he was deeply inside until later on in the book, like much later on. For content information, there is some swearing in this, not much, but there is also a part where he talks about getting high. So that's just something to be aware of. And next I want to talk about a classic. And by classic, I mean like everyone's told me, why haven't you read this yet? I am just starting to get into Jane Austen books, okay? This is the 4th Jane Austen book I have read in the past 3 years. Persuasion. I will say this is one of my least favorite of the Jane Austen books I've read. However, her books are just so stunning and amazing that none of them are bad. At least none of the ones I've read are bad. This is a story about a young woman who at the age of 19 gets engaged to a young man named Frederick, but he is going off into the Navy. He is trying to seek his career, and she has someone close to her that she looks up to who told her that she should not marry him. So she breaks the engagement, but is heartbroken because she really loves him. And about 8 years pass. Frederick comes over to where she lives. She lives with her father in his estate, but he cannot afford it. He has to rent it out in order to pay back loans. So the family, they move to Bath in England. And something that's interesting about this romance is there's a lack of communication at first. It's just, you know, two people are jealous of other people, thinking that they have feelings for other people, that they're ignoring them. A whole lot of drama and a lot of gossip throughout it, and people having their own opinions about different people. Anne's character is very quiet, but she has high opinions, and she is now at an age where she doesn't want to be swayed or persuaded to do things that she will regret. It is a beautifully written book, so poetically made. They don't write books as good as these anymore. Really very crunchy. Now, I listened to her podcast with her husband, Jason. I hadn't really seen her viral videos where she kind of makes fun about crunchy moms. At the same time, she's a very crunchy mom. She's so against having toxins in her house, and I'm like that. If you've been to my other channel, you know that I have plenty of videos about sustainability and different ways to detox your house, why I'm a minimalist, and there are just so many things and factors of what like she talks about that I completely am on par with her on. And what I love is that she's trying not to be judging of anyone, but it's really hard because when you have these things that you don't want your kids exposed to, you don't want them to eat certain ingredients, and you want to protect them from toxins, and you're like so anti-fragrance because they're so toxic that you go through all these different things to make sure that your children are protected. And I can relate as a mom of 3 children, but she talks about how she doesn't want to look down on anyone, and she's trying not to be judging, but people are going to feel that way anyway because you have a lifestyle that you are living that is maybe different, or maybe someone doesn't understand it. So she sticks to her intuition and the way she wants to live. I'm really glad that I read this. It's a quick book. I wish it were longer, actually. She's very funny. Maybe it doesn't come across too much in here, but she totally has some funny stories, and I can relate to her and her upbringing because there's one point she says how her dad microwaves plastic around like a bagel or something, and how they ate those things. And like, my mom has always microwaved plastic, and I've always, even in the 90s, I would tell her, Mom, you shouldn't do that, without really understanding. I was just a kid. Learning to balance how to be a good mom, but also giving space for them to grow. And every single chapter ends with Jason having a point of view about something in that, whatever it was written in that chapter. And he's a really supportive husband. Next, I want to talk about two really cozy reads, and one that may just become one of my very favorite books of all time now. Let's just start with my favorite, The Blue Castle, guys. Have you ever heard of this? This is by Ella Montgomery, who wrote Anne of Green Gables, and I read every single Anne of Green Gables books. This is the second book I've ever read that is outside of the Anne books, and it was delightful. It is totally cottagecore. Oh my word, it is so beautifully written. It has so much forest love. So let me tell you what this is about. The main character's name is Valancy. I don't know how to say her name. It is so unique though. Valancy. I'm gonna say Valancy. It's just lovely how it rolls off the tongue there, but I might be wrong. Anyway, what I love about this book is she talks about how she was kind of controlled by her family. And she is 29 years old, as she is deemed an old maid. Everyone reminds her of it. No one can tell her that she's not. They just always have to bring it up to her. Like, well, you're never gonna get married. You're an old maid. And she's just like, uh-huh. And she lets everyone have their thoughts and opinions. She just takes it like a champ, and she really is too sweet. But then she goes to the doctor. Before I get to that, Blue Castle's her bedroom that she has lived in her whole life, and how she uses her imagination as if she is in her own castle with her own loves, and she changes her loves once in a while as she grows, and that they whisk her off to a beautiful land. One day she decides she wants to go to the doctor. Not the doctor that her family all wants her to go to. They have a specific doctor. Everything is specific because they have an opinion on everything and everyone. She has to do everything, including wear the clothes they want her to wear and her hair the way they want her to wear it. She really has no say. My heart yearned for her that whole time that everything in this, I just felt for her, and I felt like I was a part of this story. It is so well written. So anyway, she goes to the doctor and he gives her a checkup. He's like, oh, you're great, you know, but then she gets a letter later that day stating that she has about a year left to live. And so this is all in the beginning of the book, guys. So she decides, you know what? I'm gonna live my life. I'm not gonna care what people are trying to say to me anymore and how I should live my life. I'm gonna go do how I want to. And the people that they look down on, I'm gonna interact with them and find out who they really are. So she goes and she decides she's gonna be a housemaid for someone that's a relative, and she's gonna care for someone even though she is sick herself. Through all that, eventually a romance happens. And the Blue Castle is themed throughout this. She talks about her Blue Castle. There is also this author. She loves these books by this John Foster. John Foster has everything delightful to say about nature, and she reads it to everyone around her. She soaks it in so much. Throughout this book, she grows. And at the very end of the book, I cried. It was so good. This is totally a 5-star for me. Content-wise, there are a couple D words. A lot of them are lined out as if like they would say D with lines, so you're not actually reading swears. There were a couple times that it is said, but otherwise it is such a great romantic tale, and I can't give anything away, but believe me, there is so much cottagecore in this for those who love that. This is one of the best books I've read in a long time. The Rainfall Market. I just recently heard about this book and I said, okay, let me check my library, see if they have it. It was funny because it was just coming out to my library, and I put a hold on it, and right away they said, okay, you could pick it up. We just got it in. I was like, yes. So I'm like the first one to read this from my library. And I was looking really forward to it. Look at this beautiful cover. I love covers like this. It is so gorgeous. This is by a Korean author. It is very short. I wish it were longer, actually. It is just like 200 pages, so just a little bit over. And this is such a beautiful story. I think that this will touch a lot of hearts. I didn't adore this book, but it was good. I enjoyed it. It's about a young girl. You could see her there. Her name is Saren. So what's really cute about this book is in the very beginning, they have pictures of the characters, the main characters. And at first when I read these, I was like, okay, these are a lot of characters. How am I going to keep track of them all? But as I read it, I would look back to the beginning to just see like, wait, who was this? And then I was like, oh, okay. I'd say this is good for middle grade and up to read. Anyone can enjoy this. So Saren, or maybe Seirin, I'll say Saren, but Seirin is probably, or Seirin. I don't know how it would be pronounced, so I'm sorry if I butchered it, but she doesn't like her life. She's had a tough life. A lot of things are not going her way. Her family is a mess, and she wants to go find what she reads in this book at the library that tells her about the rainfall market. And so she gets in the mail, she sends out a letter and she receives a response with a ticket, a special ticket that can get her to this special spirit world. So it's like a world within a world. And they explain as she interacts with the characters what they do in our world. When she goes into this other world, she gets this guide cat. You can see the little cat. This cat helps her, and he's kind of dog-like. He just acts like a dog. And she has to collect or find a special orb in order to find a new, improved life. She has troubles. There's a lot of interesting situations. I can't give anything more away. It was beautiful. It was sweet. It wasn't the most amazing, but I had fun with it. Last is probably the toughest book out of this whole bunch. It's really hard for me to even talk about it. I'm gonna be really brief. It's way too long of a book, so I'll just say that. The Light of Days. Now this book I had heard of for a while. I believe they're making a movie about it, and it's about the women resistance fighters in Poland, and that's during World War II. It is one of the toughest things to read. This author talks about varying women that existed, who still exist, some of them, and mainly the ghettos of parts of Poland, and how the Jews were forced into those areas, how they survive, if they're able to survive from that. The way they survive, there were just so many horrific accounts, and there were so many things that were talked about that were so violent, so horrible, so gruesome, so awful. Everything that you could think of that's evil is in this book and happened in real life. I will say, while the author did really good research on it and gathered a lot of stories, there were times where she would like talk about a character, but then jump to some other characters, and there were so many different women with their names, and the names are all Polish, and so it was hard for me to try to remember them all. But then sometimes she would have a side story about one that's very briefly mentioned, and then she'll go back to the story of another person that she brought up. So it's just a little scatterbrained at times because I'm like invested in this story, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I gotta go to this story now. I just wish it flowed better. The stories are so important. I think women's voices from that time are silenced often. I mean, they were silenced, or they tried to silence them. And just while I liked the stories, I didn't care for the book. I just didn't care much for the way this book was written. It was too informational, where I think the information could have been developed in a better way. They tried to like cover everything. And while I appreciate learning, I feel like it was just overload. Like I said, the story is so important. So yeah, 6 books. This is the biggest review that I have shown here. Have you read any of these? Do you love any of these? Will you be reading any of these? I would love to hear your take. Again, if you must read one of these books, definitely read The Blue Castle and Persuasion. I'd say my least favorite of these books was probably Cabin, but I'm glad I read it. When you read books, you want to get sucked into them like right away, and you want to keep reading it. I didn't feel that with Cabin, so that's why I'm stating that one is my least favorite. Hope you have a great day, and thanks again for reading and for joining me.